We are back, and we are joined now by Tyler Vasseur, shop steward with the National Association of Letter Carriers, Branch 9. Tyler, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Emma, thanks for having me back.
For sure. So, before we get into some of your contract negotiations, you have not. Mail carriers have been without a contract since May 2023, which is just crazy. But coming up on 2 years. But this morning, or I guess yesterday, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, who was initially appointed by Trump and then kept on by the Biden administration, it's been announced that he's stepping down. As a postal worker, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, so DeJoy, definitely not a fan. I was definitely not a fan of DeJoy. I think most postal workers were not a fan of DeJoy. Like you said, he was first put in place under the first Trump administration. This was right on the backs of a Trump administration report that came out that recommended privatization of the Postal Service. So it was pretty clear DeJoy, coming from the logistics industry, was put in place in order to try to implement privatization or some sort of plans heading in that direction. The 10-year Delivering for America plan came out of that, and it's pretty clear that DeJoy isn't stepping down just by himself. I'm sure he got a phone call or two, and ultimately, I think it's because he's not going fast enough, and he's not an effective messenger or deliverer of of privatization. I think it's pretty clear we're likely to get someone worse than DeJoy. We're very likely to see a Doge-friendly, Trump-endorsed Postmaster General that will either push outright for privatization or more likely look for outsourcing of processing, outsourcing of all of the trucking, things like that, and how letter carriers will feel that, on top of the fact that if other postal unions are weakened, we're weakened. The way that we'll feel that is that we will see probably an increase in harassment based off of the GPS data on our scanners because of that. And so ultimately, I think we've got a big fight on our hands, to say the least.
Yeah. Can you explain for folks why DeJoy was kept on under the Biden administration?
That's the $1 million question. I think, like what we saw with the Biden administration, they didn't want to rock the boat. I'm sure they had their reasoning, and it was, hey, let's see how this 10-year plan rollout goes. Ultimately, I don't have an answer for that. I think Biden should have given him the boot. Obviously, there's a postal board of governors, but there's a way for the president clearly to be a part of that process. Yeah.
Yeah. It's what would a privatization model look like? I mean, we would be talking about increased prices for postage and shipping, and I mean, this is an American institution that people have relied on for centuries, to deliver to areas that are not profitable, right? Rural areas, the Postal Service still has to deliver mail to people that may be in an area where there's a very low population density, and so hey, UPS may not go there, but the USPS has to go there. Like that would be, I think, the reality, right? Is there would be postal service deserts for areas that are not profitable, in addition to the labor concerns.
That's exactly right. I forgot what it was. Some Republican, I don't know if he was a House rep or a senator, who came out and with an op-ed, basically inviting Doge to take a look at USPS. And what he was proposing, because it would be difficult to privatize outright. That doesn't mean it's not possible, but it'd be difficult to do it all at once. What he was recommending is, he was saying, oh, look at these healthcare costs and look at these pensions. We need to outsource the processing in the processing facilities. We need to look for other things to outsource, janitorial services, trucking, all APWU, all union positions. And so I think they would probably go there first. They would try to outsource those things. It's difficult for them to outsource or privatize delivery as it currently stands, because we deliver to every single house. We have letter carriers in every single community, every corner of this country, delivering every single day. So they would probably go for the processing first. But if it were to happen, you're exactly right. We've seen an increase in prices, and not just at USPS, but across the board, because the existence of a public postal service that has relatively affordable prices, as I've said before,
It's like a public option for healthcare, right? Even though I would want a fully socialized healthcare system, a public option would also bring down insurance costs because they would have to compete the private insurance with the public option. It's the same thing with the Postal Service.
Right.
And so that now it brings me to your contract negotiations and the fact that the letter carriers have been fighting for a year and a half for a fair wage. Last time we spoke to you was, I think, in November. You were still in negotiations, and then earlier this month, the letter carriers rejected a proposal. So what was that proposal? And I guess if you could just take everybody through the timeline of your negotiations that led you to the present day.
Yeah, so it was actually, negotiations started 2 years ago. February of 2023 is when negotiations started. The contract expired in May of 2023. We got the tentative agreement in, I think, October 14th, mid-October. And so when we last spoke, we were actually just about to receive our ballot. And so we received the ballot during peak season, which for anyone who knows anything about the Postal Service or delivery companies in general, peak season between Thanksgiving and basically New Year's, it's, you basically have a double the load every single day of mail and packages to deliver. And so voting happened at a very, after Trump's election when people were fearful of what could happen. It happened after, during in the middle of peak season when people are busy and overworked. And so it's been really 2 years that we've been a part of this process. And just to get into some of the numbers in the background, for those who don't know, we voted down this contract. This was a historic no vote for NALC members. And I know historic is thrown around a lot. I think it's overused. I think it's applicable here because this is only the second time a contract has been voted down in NALC's 55 years of collective bargaining history. This is only the second time. The last time this happened was in 1978. And that was a time when workers were dealing with their own inflation, much higher inflation, but precarious economic outlook. There was a rank and file reform caucus, a movement that came out of the 1970s strike that actually took that, won lots of democratic internal reforms in those 8 years, organized a no vote on that 1978 contract, and then took national leadership shortly thereafter. And so this contract was rejected by an over 2-to-1 margin. There was a 42% increase in voter turnout compared to the last contract that we voted on. And there were more no votes this time than total turnout for the last contract. So those are some of the numbers, which I would argue make it a historic event in my union's history.
And can you explain why the contract was voted down and what some of the offers were compared to what you all are asking for? We went over this in November, but I think it's helpful for folks who didn't see that interview.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the main headline, there's lots of details, lots of work rules that we could go into, but just for the broader audience, the main thing that really infuriated workers after working 600 days without a contract was that we got 1.3% annual wage increases, general wage increases, 1.3%. So over the life of a 3-year contract, it was 3.9%. And the argument is, combine that with our cost of living adjustments, that's a halfway decent raise. But our cost of living adjustments are not one-to-one with inflation. And so if that cost of living adjustment increase and that 1.3% per year isn't higher than inflation, then we're looking at a pay cut. And that's what we were arguing. This is a pay cut that we were accepting if we accepted that contract. And so things like I'm the chair of Build Up Fighting NALC, a growing rank and file reform caucus in NALC. And our demands were for $30 an hour starting wage, an all-career workforce, an end to the 2-tier pay scale, an end to mandatory overtime, the right to strike, things like that. And
what's the starting wage now, Tyler?
What was that?
What's the starting wage now?
It's oh man, I should probably know this. It depends on where you're starting off because you get hired either as non-career or as career. And they were having such a hard time in hiring people that they started hiring to career in some places. But it's what is it, like 18 or 19 an hour?
Gotcha.
In the non-career places.
Yeah.
Which if you're living in California, can you imagine that? I got a friend in suburbs of LA, and you have to work 60 hours a week just to scrape by.
Right. And the 1.3% increase is like extremely insulting, because as you say, it's not enough to keep up with the pace of inflation. And it's also what's the fact that that's coming to you after this long negotiation process. Do you think they felt emboldened last time we spoke by Trump's victory? I mean, the fact that they didn't come to you with anything more substantial than that is, after all of this time, it shouldn't be shocking to me, but it is, I guess, indicative of how they think they can bully the union.
Are you telling the USPS negotiators?
Yeah.
Emboldened? So this
Yeah.
TA came out in October, so it was before the election.
Sorry,
Um,
gotcha.
yeah, no. But I think that the main thing is this contract was not very different, especially the economics of it, was very similar to the last several rounds of contracts, especially uh, at the ones starting after the recession, the 2008, 2009 recession. And so for them, they probably thought, hey, we'll just do what we always do, 1.3% per year, keep everything else the same, tweak things here and there. Um, and so I think they just were, both NELC's leadership and USPS just had no clue that uh, that the anger that the membership that the workforce is expressing could actually be organized and actually rejected this deal. I think that's probably where it came from, more so than them predicting that Trump was going to win.
So, where now do you stand after rejecting this latest offer? What is the some of the next deadlines that people should be looking out for in terms of your negotiation process?
Yeah, just before I get into that, I just want to talk just really quickly about the Vote No campaign itself. Like, how did we get
Sure.
this? Is that all right? Like,
Yeah.
we BFN, Build a Fighting NELC, launched a Vote No campaign that had over 700 attendees, and there were other forces in the reform movement. There's a couple different groups that are running for national leadership. CLC, Concerned Letter Carriers, is one. Mike Tariff, a business agent out of Illinois, is another. They took part in this, encouraged their supporters to be a part of this, because there was a lot of anger and frustration online and in the stations. But like we argued, you can't rely on momentum. We got to organize this. And it sounds really small, but this is the first time a lot of members took part in anything like this. We organized parking lot meetings and rallies before work. Get to work an hour or 30 minutes beforehand. Someone's bringing donuts, someone else is bringing coffee. Discuss off the clock the contract. Take a vote no group photo with a big sign that says vote no, 1.3% hell no, things like that. BFN had flyers and materials calling for our demands, and vote no recommendation resolutions were passed in over 50 NELC branches. And so, like, again, it sounds small, but this is the first time a lot of members had engaged with any sort of union activity around this sort of thing. I think inflation was the key driver driving this no vote, but this campaign made it a blowout for sure. And so right now we're in that there was after the contract rejected, there's a 15-day period of that renegotiation can take place. That ended yesterday. So NELC's executive council is meeting today. They're going to announce whether they have a renegotiated contract that we get to vote on again, or whether it could be a whole thing, or whether it's going to arbitration, and it's binding interest arbitration, and we would then not get a vote on the contract. It would just a panel of 3 arbitrators, 1 USPS, 1 NELC, one neutral, would decide the contract for members, which is something I have kind of a problem with, which I think is pretty undemocratic, but that's the process that we're in. And so then that raises the question of what do we do once it heads likely to arbitration,
Right.
Which is, I think, where we're headed now.
And what do you do then, right? Because they could essentially come back with a very, as you say, still insulting offer, and then that means the clock has run out on this kind of process. So then you have arbitration. What are some of the plans of action, and how can people support maybe trying to put pressure on the powers that be, essentially, to come back with a fair contract to avoid this particular outcome?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not completely out of our hands. BFN has been arguing, and the reform movement broadly has been arguing that we have a role to play when it goes to arbitration. Arbitrators don't exist in a bubble. They are subject to public pressure. They're subject to, they see the news, they see what's happening. And so what we're calling for, there's actually a march in DC hosted by the 2026 reform candidate for NELC president, Mike Tariff, on March 23rd, marching from NELC headquarters to USPS headquarters, which is 1.3 miles.
Do we have that link, Bradley? Yeah.
Yeah. And so BFN is calling for nationally coordinated rallies on that day. On our website, we just had a BFN Zoom meeting on Sunday where we're encouraging people to bring resolutions to their next union meeting to organize rallies in their area on Sunday, March 23rd, to coordinate with that rally. We obviously want to coordinate with other coastal unions. We want to get federal unions out. And we want we want to show the public, win the public to our side, and show that these are our demands. This is what we're fighting for. This is what we need as we head into arbitration, so that it's not completely out of our hands. But ultimately, Emma, this whole process has really shown one of the key demands that BFN is fighting for is the right to strike. We do not have the right to strike or even threaten a strike. This is what happens.
Exactly.
You go 2 years. You negotiate for 2 years. Negotiations should not last more than a month or two. I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out there. But this is why we're fighting for the right to strike. It's a basic democratic right that federal workers are currently denied. The post office job, the jobs at the post office, which used to be blue collar royalty, essentially, they were high paying, really the jobs with good benefits because of the gains that came out of the 1970 strike. And every year we get away from 1970, the more and more we have lost buying power. We have lost benefits. We have gotten worse, more loosened working conditions. And so that's ultimately why the right to strike is such a big push for BFN. But ultimately, in the here and now, I really encourage NALC members listening to bring resolutions for a March 23rd contract rally to the next union meeting, and reach out to other federal unions, other postal unions to be there.
We have it up here right now, all out for March 23rd rallies. You can go to, we'll put a link to this below but it's really fighting NALC.com, where you can get the updates that you need. Tyler, really appreciate your time today and giving us an update on that. And we'll check back in with you soon, probably closer to that date, to get an update. Thanks so much.
Good. Thank you, Emma. And I just encourage NALC members to go to that website, fightingnalc.com, and sign up to join BFN. We have material on there about the history of BFN. Where did we come from? Where are we headed? And also material about a guide of how to start a chapter. Because we're building chapters across the country. We've already got them started in Portland, in Minneapolis, in Buffalo, New York, and a number of other places. And so I just really encourage people to get involved, because this is a fight that's bigger than just this one contract. It's ultimately a fight to fight privatization and a fully functioning public postal service.
Yeah, and I think that it's also just a great opportunity in the next 4 years to find a community. This isn't just limited, of course, to postal workers, but joining a union and fighting for your coworkers and your colleagues and your community and other folks in solidarity is a great way to fight against this far-right administration over the next 4 years, where opportunities will be limited. So, Tyler, thanks so much, and really appreciate your time today.
All right, thanks, Emma.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.